World Vision has a mandate doing disaster management, development, and advocacy. Our development on the ground should reflect this mandate. They should integrate the way we do all those three, I call it three ministry lines. ADP is not just do a development in the sense of doing community-based long-term development. ADP is also strengthening the community resilience, how they can be prepared to address any disaster, either natural disaster or man-made disaster. The same thing also with advocacy. They need to be part of the integration to address the policy issues on the ground. So again, for me, is the development framework is important to address all those three issues together. Our design, our people, our resources should reflect how we can integrate all those ministry streams. I always use a mission statement as a kind of a principle how to answer this question. You know, our mission statement mentioned that our emergency relief response, transformational development, and promoting justice is our ministry. So it's important that those are our mandates. Okay, it's not about development is more important than the others, or advocacy is more important than the others. I would like to see that all those ministry lines are critical and should be implemented contextually on the ground, depend on the context and depends on the opportunity we have on the ground. This is always the challenging for the management in World Vision. Few things. First is that big disaster is basically interrupt or stopped our long-term development. Not only that, they often sacrificing our long-term investment in the community. So it's important, that's why it's important that our long-term development always being prepared to address any large-scale impact of the disasters. So that's kind of a dialogue between understanding the long-term development, at the same time understanding the resiliency of the community to address any shock coming to them. So that's for me the challenge. The other challenge that we need to be really is from the management perspective. Moving from the development mode to disaster response mode and vice versa is always a complex management processes. They require leadership, they require organizational resiliencies and flexibility to address those issues. So for me, is large-scale development is always kind of giving us two big challenges in terms of ministry programming, but also in terms of the way organizational design being put in place. Again, there are different I call it different phases back from the disaster to the development programming. First of all, of course, from the program design perspective, how you start looking at the rehabilitation from the disaster, from the emergency relief. You look for the reconstruction and the rehabilitation, and then you move into a long-term development. But at the same time, it's important to learn to capture learning from the disaster. How then you build a new way of doing business for the long term. So I think that's a really a challenge for us, because often when disaster relief response end, it's also end the way the framework, the paradigm, the thinking, the threat. We forget all those things. I think it's important that memories, I call it memories of our programming, remember this disaster and then put in place into the integrated mode with our development. The other challenge would be is kind of how to bring, using the emergency relief or disaster response learning into the programming model. into the policies influence to the partners and government. The third piece that often is very difficult is that people, not easy for many of our staff to kind of transitioning from development to disaster or vice versa. We also need to help them how to do so. There are two levels of addressing how to address this question, Christy. I think the first is that the disaster management should be part of the integration of disaster management and development have to be addressed at the strategic level first, not just program response. It should be part of the strategy of any national offices. If your country, if your operation are located in the disaster-prone countries or disaster-prone areas, your strategy need to be articulate and formulate those understanding. That's for me the first level of conversation. The second level, of course, on the programming on the ground, that you have to make sure the integration happen and integration occurred in that programming level. So I think that's the piece that I will see always a critical piece. So it's not just kind of, but I say it's reactive. It should be proactively managed in those two levels.